It is a live stream, yes.
Right?
Do, 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 do. And then I
Pretty
have to
blind.
mute it because then we get some wicked feedback. It is a live stream, yes.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, and we are live. So let me transition to where you can see us and our wonderful faces. All right, and transition to that. Hello. So I am Monica Ayhens-Madon with IMakeFOSS, and I'm with Sri Ramkrishna, who has been our amazing guest curator this week, while also doing FOSDEM, which way to multitask. So that is a lot of work. And he is also, when he's not doing that, he is the principal system engineer for IT Renew and a Gnome Foundation member. And it's great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, what is a principal systems engineer at IT Renew?
Well, it's yeah, I think today in open source and free software, um, there's this notion of ecosystems, and what
Hmm.
I do, it's sort of a new role. It's sort of a combination of many things. I represent IT Renew, the Sesame, to the ecosystems we care about, right? Ecosystems, we're talking about the open source projects or open hardware projects or things like the. So
Oh,
I play a liaison role a lot of times. Sometimes it's a liaison role. Sometimes I'm contributing to upstream projects from a technical perspective. Sometimes it's help. So it's just whatever it is to sustain the growth of the.
I think your audio keeps on cutting out a bit.
Let me about is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, if you could just tell us that one more time, because we got the first part, and then it just all kind of went into it's like, oh no, we can see you talking, but we
Okay.
don't know what you're saying.
My apologies.
That's okay.
So essentially, I play again I play a liaison role.
Hmm.
So or both a liaison role to open source projects or open hardware projects or uh, and so forth, as well as a technical contributor. It just depends on what it is to sustain the growth of the ecosystem.
Okay. So, and what are some of the open source projects, both on the software and the hardware side, that you all get to work with?
So the predominant one that we care about the most is the Open Compute, and the Open Compute project is a true,
Oh no, we're still having those audio issues.
okay.
Do you happen to have maybe a like a headset or oh no, we can't hear you.
Is it uh, nice expensive micro?
Yeah, the expensive microphone is kind of letting you down there. Because
Looks like it.
yeah, because it will just pick you up, and then it all of a sudden it's like it doesn't recognize that you're talking.
Yeah. Is
Okay,
uh,
that whatever you did, you just sound
okay.
louder, so that's good.
Okay. Okay. Just increasing the gain, so and then
There
talk
we
a little
go.
closer. All right.
Okay,
Okay. So you'll have to repeat the question
okay.
again.
So, what were some of the open source projects that you all work with? And I think we got it was the Open Compute.
Compute project, right? And the Open Compute project is both a combination of software and hardware. It's basically IT, hyperscale industries, leaders getting together and collaborating on building a full data center based on various data center technologies. So think about um, like network operating systems or as a software or hardware companies getting together to think about how can we design better cooling like racks that
Mm-hmm.
will properly cool better more so the idea here is that instead of uh, each company trying to do the same things over and over again, we would collaborate on the things we care about together and socialize those costs while focusing on the unique parts of our business. So, that's what's unique and wonderful about the Open Compute project is that we're building a data center lock that doesn't have vendor lock-in or things like that, but using our combined technical prowess for the benefit of everyone. So that's really one of the nice for the Open Compute and this span is really large, right? Right, we're building specifications for racks in project. We're building a network operating system on one on another one. There's a focus on security and root of trust. There's all kinds of different open compute project that we are working on. The idea here is being open and being able
Oh, down.
and of course, we also work with other organizations. That's another.
Okay,
So
I think
yeah,
the mic just kind of cut out on that last part there. I'm so sorry.
it's clearly my I should have used a headphone. So
Yeah, I think if maybe
uh,
you kind of like go a little closer to it.
okay,
There we go.
all right. So yeah. So anyway, that's the let me adjust my
There we
camera.
go. Get more of your face there.
Yeah, so you get more of my face rather than things. So yeah, so we work with a lot of organizations in there, um, and a lot of our contributions is enabling our hardware on software platforms.
Hmm.
So things like Kubernetes is important to us, and because going to build uh, cloud, on-prem cloud, right on our platforms. So that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I saw when you were talking about like the cooling, I remember one of the things that came up at your FOSDEM talk was I can't remember, was it like block or it's basically where you,
Block heating.
yes.
Right, and the idea was that you would take the output of a data center
Hmm.
and then put it to a greenhouse. You can actually use that to do greenhouse. It's There are a lot of interesting things happening in the data center realm around sustainability and green power and so forth. Uh, I think if you so Aleph and our president has this really great talk that I actually put up on our stands at FOSDEM,
Awesome.
and it has a really a number of great metrics, and which puts this thing like block heating and into context as why it's important. Uh, so there was a study out in 2016, and the amount of e-waste out there is like 49 metric tons of e-waste, and then by this year it's going to grow to 57 metric tons, right? So there's all these things that are going around sustainability, which we should be looking at, right? Same thing with carbon emissions. We're at go up to like 450 metric tons since 2013. So there's all these things happening, and because our desire for computational power is growing across the world, and
But how do
from
we
the
balance that with being ethical residents of the planet? So,
right, right, exactly. And so in this industry, it really, from a cultural fit, it really fits well with open source and open hardware because when I got into free software and open source, there was always this idea of building something from an aspirational point of view,
hmm
sharing. And I think that's true from the circular data center as well. There's an aspirational component that we all share. We're trying to be good stewards to our planet. And part of the circular data center is to reduce the amount of your carbon footprint is, or to be carbon, like a lot of companies are trying to become carbon neutral, right,
hmm
over a period of time, or carbon negative goal. And so this is what makes me feel enthusiastic about all this, is to be able to help enable that. And it sort of trickles both sides of that feeling of wanting to be aspirational, is to work in free software and open source, and
yeah, but
yeah, being good stewards.
and it also seems like it's also a very practical thing. It's aspirational without being kind of pie in the sky. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the I guess the when the topic was about circular data centers, it might be good to kind of do a quick idea of what is a
Yes.
circular data center.
Perfect.
And the circular data center is this. So the premise is that when when you are obtaining IT equipment, there is a upfront carbon cost you pay. You have to mine the materials, the raw materials that goes in, and all of that. There's a full manufacturing process, and then you come in, and then uh, you build you run the equipment, and then you have an EOL process at the end. And this is like a 3 to 4 year cycle, and at that point you it just goes to a dump or whatever. So the idea of a circular data center, or just basically a circular economy, is to reuse those equipment. Now, we're the equipment is coming from hyperscale data centers, and so we're talking about like Oracle or Google or Facebook or Dropbox.
Good
Okay,
equipment.
yeah, they're good high end equipment because they are refreshing their supply, their assets, right, every 3 years.
hmm
So you're not getting some sort of cheap stuff. But after it comes by and gets recertified, we're able to offer them uh, to second tier markets like gaming or industrial or whatever. But there's another component. It also is opens up to markets that uh, may find the cost of some of this computing equipment prohibitive in the first place, right? So that means uh, uh, those marketers who may traditionally not had access to them before may have access to them because they're much more available, right? And
hmm
so that's and that could enable things like internet for everyone across the world or whatever it is, where you have that IT infrastructure.
Uh
So that's oops, I
oh.
walked away from
Closer to
the
the
phone.
mic.
so so yeah, so the idea is always is to keep equipment, defer the idea of manufacturing as much as possible, because in that general cycle, 75% of is coming from that initial pre-manufacturing, that manufacturing phase, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something we want to defer to. The other thing is those raw material is limited, right? They're
Yeah.
at a
I mean,
time, if you run out of them, then you're gonna end up going, but like
maybe to an asteroid, but that, who knows how long that's going to be.
or even worse, something like deep sea mining, right? Now we're
Oh,
we're
no,
this way
no,
where
no,
we don't want.
no.
So now we're looking at ecological disruptions. And so by deferring them and recycling them, we can keep those equipments going and so forth. And so this is one of the things that I think is that to address the practical part of this is that we can take them and then we can offer them at much lower reduced lower price. So there's a huge opportunity there to make money as well,
Mm-hmm.
while also maintaining um, being good stewards.
Yeah. Now, how long that equipment, how long will it last after it served kind of its primary use?
So it's 3 years as well. So you can extend 3 years. One of the nice thing is that uh, when your software is open, like your firmware is open, you
Mm-hmm.
could just stretch it indefinitely, right?
Oh,
Even if
yeah.
it's up to 40, right? You can keep that going as long because the firmware is open. You've opened up the firmware. In fact, that's one of the great parts of the circular economy is we enable hardware to be open so that it can keep going for indefinite. So if it finds uses after the second use, right, and then we can keep going for ever long as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, yeah. But like from a business perspective,
Then you've guaranteed that
yeah,
3 years. And I imagine, are there people who have like they get one of these, they get the refurbished equipment, and then 3 years later, after Facebook or Oracle or whoever gets is on their next cycle, can they basically enter into kind of a regular relationship where they know every 3 years they'll be getting that equipment?
uh, ostensibly yes, sure.
Yeah, that's very
You can
cool.
you can as long as there's that supply chain, yes, we can keep on updating as we go. And that speaking of the supply chain, we own the supply chain, right?
Yeah,
So and that's another from a security perspective, owning the supply
yeah. Now
chain.
I hear that you have one of these in your house.
I do.
Nice.
It's
So,
running right now, so it's pretty quiet. So
yeah, I
uh,
remember that during your talk, and it's like we can't hear it. That is
uh,
really impressive because I think
that's
all of us
the
know those noisy things.
yeah, that's the noise from just an idle machine. Now, you can get if I were to push it right, then
Hmm.
you will hear the fans. But moment, no. So, uh, your spouse or partner is not going to be overly upset for
Yeah.
having equipment, unless of course actually do the real work on it.
Yeah, especially those of us who are now kind of having to share that space. So,
Right,
which is
right,
which is tricky. So, I mean, nice, but also it's kind of a little bit of a dance to be like, okay, who has meetings when? Who's recording something? How do we work this all out? I My
right,
husband was in a
right.
meeting last week and I was doing some hotshot racing training because I do that with Impy and some of the people from his stream. It's marvelous fun, but I was over here like cursing and swearing under my breath, and my husband's trying to do training and he's like, we can hear you, and I'm like, oh my god.
No.
Just like, sorry. So at least your circular data center won't do any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Without me dismissing, I do have Velociraptors, so
yeah, the Velociraptors, and we did get to see one at FOSDEM this weekend.
yes, they one of them did plan an attack,
Yes,
a Q&A session. Yes,
yeah, which was super cute. So
yes.
yeah, we have.
That's why the door is closed right now. So there's no
That's probably
opportunity
smart.
for kitten attacks.
Yeah, especially since all the nice warm stuff is in here. So yeah, so And speaking now, it seemed I did go. I dropped in at the Sesame Discovery booth,
Yeah.
and then I dropped into one of your. I think. Oh, you all were the last session in. Was it the containers dev room?
Yes. The containers dev
Yeah,
room. Yeah.
on Sunday, and that was a really great talk. And I remember the Q&A. We just kind of, instead of going to the hallway track, we just kind of, well, nobody's going to kick us out, so we can all
Right.
just stay
Exactly.
here.
I think that was the benefit of having the last talk on the dev room was that
Hmm.
we could have an extended Q&A. So we were just talking about that
Yeah,
earlier
yeah,
today at work. Oh, it was so nice to have that extended Q&A. So
yeah. And it seems that from kind of what I've kind of read and seen, that even though it was a virtual FOSDEM this year, that people seem to think that it went pretty well.
yeah, I think so. I think this model is really nice, and I've attended a lot of other kind of events, and both from a
Hmm.
community perspective and as well as so, and of course I help organize my own a conference
Hmm.
called Linux App Summit,
Yep.
and where so I'm able to do some comparisons and I've already talked to our own organizing team about, hey, what do you think about this doing it? And the community conferences are somewhat like that, Board
Hmm.
Academy and Guadec, which
Aquatic. Yep.
you also attended.
I
Uh,
did with my cup of tea.
yep, and there's always great energy in community
Hmm.
conferences, positive and negative.
Yeah, because it seems like the ones that I can't recall which one, but it was one of the more corporate ones, and it was the webinars, and then you had the Q&As in a Slack, and there really weren't kind of any social things, and I mean, this was one of the first ones though, and so it was just kind of like, that just, it didn't feel kind of the same. And so, I
Right,
mean, none of them are going to, but I think some of them, like Wadek and Lass and Seagull, and I know, oh, and then Academy and now FOSDEM, they're figuring out what works to have it not just be you sitting in front of your computer listening to webinars all day long, to keep something
right,
social and let you meet
right,
new people, which is half of the fun. And for those of
right,
us who are super social and have been stuck in our houses this year and who can't just meet make new friends, it's just having that has been great. Like, I hung out in the cafe one morning and I'm like, oh, I'm having tea and eating pain au chocolat, and we're all talking about what we're doing and the weather, and it was really nice. So,
I, I would say like we were talking, you know, amongst friends like, oh, by now we would have been in Brussels and we would have been,
yeah.
look at each other's lives or what we've been doing at work or what's exciting, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest part of the moving to this online world is that complete lack of human contact, which is such a integral part of free and open source software, is the people, right? So
Mhm.
not being able to do that connection and ask in the energy of others
Yeah.
is so good.
And I imagine for those of you who this is a huge change. Like, this was the first year I did any FOSS conferences and events, and so they were all online.
Yeah,
And
they're
and
yeah,
so one of the things that I think has been the silver lining in all of that is A, I've gotten to go to these things where before money, time just never would have
Right,
allowed
right,
me to. And then B is when I get to go when we have Guadec in person again, when we have the Linux application summit in person. I'm gonna know people.
right,
It's not gonna be like, okay, I don't know anybody here. This is awkward. But like, oh, there's Sri, and there's all the people I met from Gnome, and here's the people I met in this Postgres talk, and it's just so having this chance to kind of build up those relationships. That's I think that's the one of the few good things that has come out of this year.
right. And in these community conferences like Academy or Guadec or Oz, they're true community
Mhm.
conferences. So it's easy to integrate yourself because it's really just a bunch of friends
Yeah.
getting together again and hopefully and making new friends
Yeah.
and I remember the last was quite a bit like that, but it was a great celebration of both some and KDE communities
Yeah.
getting together and intermixing in ways that we hadn't in the past, and it's such a privilege to work with my KDE counterpart as part of the community,
Mhm.
and I get to talk with them every week, and it's we really integrate as a team for that conference, and so it's just a wonderful feeling,
Yeah.
and how we combine our talents or our personality.
I also did think that the April Fool's Day joke that you all did last year with K- Gnome
Ah, yes, the kiddo.
that was fantastic.
The KDE folks who did most of that. That's a wonderful effort.
That was great, but it's just so nice to see things that are some of the things that kind of people do tend to argue about the most, and it's just like, oh wait, but we can collaborate on this and get together, and yes, we can have preferences for what we use, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a great relationship with the people who make that. So
Right, right.
yeah.
And and to your point, the joining of communities is important going
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah.
With we're stronger as a joint community than we are in our especially if you're trying to build the the perennial joke of year to desktop or anything else. But we
Mhm.
can't do that without building standards. We can't do that without collaborating with each other, and we cannot do that by staying within our silos. We need
Yeah.
to move and interact with others, and a lot of the things that and this skill is what I'm also paid to do, right? So I'm
Yay.
playing both ends right here. So, um, but but doing that is something that's important because that's if we're trying to build influence within the larger market, and we need to be reach to as a joint community, and I don't just mean KD and Gnome, but
Mhm.
all the others like Elementary
Mhm.
or other projects, Solus, even the the so by working all together, we can really build build present as a single entity so that people who want to come in and write applications for us uh, in Linux, there's a place to go, right? And
Yeah, and who see that it's like, okay, there is a market for this and a community that's receptive to it, and they might have different takes on this, on what the Linux desktop might look like to them, but
right,
they're going to work together in ways to make it better for all of them. And
Right.
I think that the way maybe that's been done in the past of, trying to keep everyone in their separate little spaces maybe hasn't really worked. So,
No, I don't. And uh, if we do this, we may have difference of opinions on
hmm
what what is a desktop experience, but we can always organize around applications,
hmm
and that's always going to be important to both communities for desktops to be useful. And
yeah,
so
yeah, because
uh,
ultimately we want to
the other side
have
of
our
that,
desktops to do things, and it's a little bit hard to do that without applications. So,
right?
I mean,
And and of course there's growth, right? So we want to what we're building is not just free software or open source or whatever, but also proprietary apps. Build an inclusive community for everyone, so it's not just we want to lock out one or the other. We also want to reach out to organizations who are building a lot of these apps that run on multi different operating systems.
yeah.
So we need to embrace that too. So web apps and native apps and everything else. So we need to build.
Oh, closer to the mic. Closer
Yeah.
to the
Oh,
mic.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. So
No, so it's been nice to see those kind of impulses kind of coming from different directions, and hopefully that will just that sense of making this work intersectional will really just keep going forward. So,
right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting times for sure, and
Mhm.
I think we're getting better at our craft. Our projects are getting better at our craft, and uh, at least from the GNOME perspective, and for your audience, I'm a foundation member. So if we're talking about desktops here, it's because the other half of my life is when I'm not doing circular data centers, is I'm also working on the GNOME desktops or the application ecosystem. So
Mhm.
those are my community work. But so we're coming out with a new UX and
Yes, we've heard about that.
yeah. I think when I was talking about perfecting our craft, I think one of the most remarkable things that's happening uh, here is that we're able to actually build images. So one of the things in the past that definitely been criticized from the project is changes are suddenly show up rather suddenly, and UX changes and things like that, and um, there's this notion that everybody's a beta tester immediately, right? On the things you do, and now that when we moved to GitLab and we actually moved into modern software practices,
Mhm.
and so we're actually able to build things like do CI/CD like the rest of the open source world. In a way, we were kind of having a different process that wasn't as aligned. But now that we're aligned, we can actually start looking at and leveraging the rest of the open source world because now we're sort of using the same tools. So
Yeah.
so we're able to refine those things but the idea of being able to have images. So with all the new designs, the people who are interested in the community are able to actually download an image, play with the new UX, provide some feedback, and then in that iteration. I think going forward, the exciting part, at least on the GNOME desktop, is that that cycle moves faster because um, the designers are able to implement a design and get a result very quickly that they can test on a virtual machine and then iterate faster. So I think the idea that the velocity of iteration is going to go much faster than it was. Now that could be good or could be bad, just depending on how rapid changes happen. In our community, we or any community change is always looked at as something that could be good or
Or
bad or it just depends,
yeah,
right?
it's kind of a mixed bag, and you don't know till you put your hand
And
in.
it takes a while, and it's very personal uh, for people in our community because technologists, we look at our computers as an extension of ourselves. It's a very personal tool, and when it doesn't behave the way the notion is that we dictate what the computer does. It does not
Hmm.
dictate to us. For many technologists, the idea of surrendering, which you kind of have to do with the GNOME desktop, surrendering to a particular style is a disturbing notion. I'll think- so, but it works best when you adapt to it rather than forcing
Yeah. So, well, I know as someone who has a laptop coming tomorrow that's going to have stock Ubuntu on it, who's going to get to start to see the fruits of all that GNOME desktop development,
Yeah,
because I've been using Ubuntu Mate for the past 2 years, so it's mostly been GNOME 2 for me. so,
yeah, yeah.
so
Well,
but I think
that's
it's going to be good to kind of see the different iterations that people have. And
right.
also knowing that, part of my work is going to be helping members of the Ubuntu community who are using this, that as much as I like the desktop I have now, I can't just stay in that wheelhouse forever. So, I mean, I'm going to like, and of course, this is we were talking before we started about how many computers do we have in our room. So that's going to make one, two, three. I have a laptop. I say every weekend I'm going to put elementary on this laptop. It's been about 52 weekends. I haven't put it on there yet. So I
Right.
know. And then the laptop coming tomorrow that will have stock Ubuntu. But I think getting to see kind of just with our flavors, like all the different desktop environments that people have made. So I think that part of my, I don't know, my 2021 being stuck in the house goals are to get to know those a little bit more, to get to, I don't know, to get to understand, what people really do like about these and kind of where everybody is coming from in their desktop experience.
Right, right, and it's wonderful that we have such a wide variation of desktops. And
Hmm.
I shudder to think if there was only one, we would have that project would have to be the be all for everybody's whatever workflow, and
Yeah.
it's probably not a very sustainable way to do that. But to have, I think it's a natural thing in open source to have so many different visions on what that is, and being able to for those who have very particular kind of workflows
Hmm.
um, that isn't mainstream, having different projects to accommodate them is a wonderful thing. I think a lot of people think they only have one choice because they believe, but no one project, at least for being part of this community, can fully satisfy. So having many of them is, I think, is a natural outcome for open source. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So and of course we all get to learn uh, from each other what works, what doesn't, and I think in this way we don't organize ourselves to have those conversations and what works and what doesn't because there's no way to measure them,
Hmm.
and this is one of the other things that I think as a community we should learn to be better at is measuring our success, and so. hopefully those are things that we will do as well. Is really to measure. So how do you know you're improving or not with that
If you don't
analytics?
know where you are or where you've been. So, and
Right. Yeah.
and that's a tough thing because some of those we're trying to quantify somewhat qualitative things. And
Mm.
so how and I know that there thankfully are groups that are working on trying to put a degree of quantifiableness on things that are kind of how we tend to look at as just preferences. And so
Mm.
kind of knowing and things kind of more with that are related to feeling. Kind of like how satisfied are you with this? How happy? But I think
Right.
that having that would be you're right because right now it is a bit subjective. And so I think if we could kind of, measuring things is good. So,
Yeah. The challenge is trying to uh, also adhere to privacy and security
mhm.
and whatnot. That's one of the hard parts. Like, nobody can tell you how many Linux desktops, how many computers are running a Linux desktop out there. Right? Some will keep that number close to their vest, others do not. But then, if you don't know what what this audience is, a how does one decide that they want to write an application that targets the Linux platform? So,
Yeah.
there are other notions of how do you make money for an app writer. So these are all challenges that we will
Yeah.
have, and that's a larger conversation within open source too, right? We
Oh
see
yeah.
a lot of things out there where where businesses are who have created a business model around an open source license, and then finding that maybe it's the wrong business model for them, and
Yeah, we've had a few conversations about that lately.
yeah. So, there's a wider conversation. I think, the desktop community has, uh, because we haven't gotten there. We're able to sort of at least see, because we didn't have the rapid growth audience that corporate open source has.
Mhm.
And we're able to, since we're moving at a much slower pace, we're actually able to have a better understanding of, if we, for me, I firmly believe we're on the cusp of our own growth and explosive growth, and so we have the opportunity to manage more. And I know that we're that more and more folks are using a Linux desktop as issues of privacy and security.
Mhm.
People don't want to be um, product, so to speak. So for those who are looking to get off that train, uh, Linux desktop is really the best way to best place to go, right?
Yeah.
For that, and so that's going to be our distinguishing factor. But I know that uh, with things like the Lenovo, I mean, large manufacturers are providing laptops with Linux pre-installed, and our app store has gotten better with Flatpak
Mhm.
and everything else. So, or even trying to target the Linux platform is a lot, regardless of whether you want to use a system or based system, all
Yep.
that. So the story looks a lot better.
Yeah. And I think that there are some very good and possibly very productive conversations to be had this year.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah. And I think the focus on being able to make support yourself writing applications on the Linux platform
mhm.
should be a dominant conversation.
That was a real, I think that was a chat at the Linux Application Summit this past year with Cassidy from Element Entry. There was a panel
Yeah, yeah.
that was really good. So hopefully we'll find ways to to financially support the people who are making these fantastic apps, so they can do that for a living, and and keep them updated, keep making more, because
Right.
otherwise it's like, well, there's a fast track to burnout if we don't. So
Sustainable open source is also something. Last year there was a Sustain OSS conference during FOSSDEM,
mm,
and there are people who are looking, how do we make sustainable open source, because people do get burnt out. I know our own folks here at GNOME are, they have too much work and very little time, and but also the ability to add more folks is hard as well. So the onboarding process is difficult, especially if you want to get down to the lower layers of the GNOME stack, right? So old code bases are like old houses. They have
yeah.
all kinds of personality quirks that you have to know and understand as you're. So there's a lot of things there. So contributions are always done within a certain context and how you accept them, because they understand how the old house and how it quirks and moans at
Yep.
night or whatever, that kind of behavior. So
So thankfully it's been nice to see some of, like, and it's great to see, like, there's such a generation span too, and to see
yeah,
even some of the youngest contributors now who are like in their teens, like starting to learn some of, like, those, the ways to contribute to those older and more fundamental parts of the stack. So
right.
yeah.
And it matures you, because I mean, for a lot of them, they're working on mature code bases. When we started GNOME, it was similar kids essentially starting
Hmm.
a open source project or a free software project, and the I think the youngest was like 9, and then the oldest was like 21,
Wow.
so something like that. And wow, that was my computer so suddenly waking up. I don't know what made it upset,
Oh
but
no.
oh, I know why, because the door is closed, so
Ah.
the temperature of the room is climbing. So, uh, but uh, we didn't understand software engineering, and so we were doing engineering without a map, I guess. And so that's why there's those three iterations of GNOME. Is each one is sort of backtracking a little bit and then applying things, right?
Yeah.
So the idea, like, we're getting to the part where finally things are testable and what we want. But back then, it was always a struggle to get all the components working together to actually make a release, right? Back in GNOME Monday. So, but these kids have an opportunity. It's like, I guess the difference was that back then our trust was very high. Anybody could come in, and then we'd accept anything that would come in. But now, like, for younger people come in, we expect more discipline from them than we did from ourselves from back when. And so uh so a commit is not as is looked at much more conservatively than it did back when. And so back then, integrated, if it break, okay, we'll fix it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was a lot of enthusiasm, but now it's fast forward now. You have you know uh, sensibly millions of people depending on the source code. So and it has to be stable, and so you can't just pop
Can't
things in
just,
there
yeah.
because your the number one job of a computer is not to lose data.
Hmm.
Right? When they find where an operating system is, the first thing is you can't lose any data, and so just then it's no longer productive. So so that's I think that's like one of the major differences between contributing to GNOME or KDE or anywhere else is a little bit more conservative than we were when we were all in our
When we were
twenties.
all much younger, which
Mm.
seems like it wasn't that long ago, and then you think, and you're like, oh, wait, yeah, it kind of was.
It kind of was.
I know,
However,
but it's nice to
we all
see
got the
too.
gray hairs to prove it now
Ugh,
too.
no kidding. Especially after this year, it's like, oh, there's a lot more gray at the temples than there is now, but than there was previously. But I think it's
Right,
also nice to see because, after all of us go do whatever it is when we stop working, which, let's be honest, we'll still be tinkering with this, that,
right,
we'll need that new group to come in. And I think it's also thinking about how do we, especially some of like these projects that we want to be long term, how do we think about getting the next group in and brought up to speed so they feel confident and, yes, aren't going to break things, but also feel empowered to let it organically grow and change. So, yeah. And I do think that the way that from my interactions with the GNOME project and the way you all have integrated into GitLab and what I've seen of your processes, it seems like a really good way to do it. It's that good attempt at reaching out to people where they are.
right,
So, and realizing it's like, yes, this might have been, kind of our sole comfort zone, but if we stay in there, we're going to miss all of these people who aren't there.
right, right. And those are challenges is to be able to retain our
Mhm.
members, especially the
Yeah.
new ones that come in. It's and because we've become a conservative project, it's not it's there's a little bit more overhead and things like that. Hopefully, moving. And I think there's some idea. How do we retain our members? How do we do all of that? And make it a fun place to work,
Yeah.
a fun place to do open source because a lot of times it does feel like a job, and
A little bit.
it shouldn't always feel that way. It should,
Yeah.
because we're here to sort of uh, have fun to some extent and be able
Mhm.
to write or do engineering without a boss breathing down your neck or having to just right you're scratching an itch because the original premise of free software and open source is that you're scratching an itch and you want to share that with less
Yeah.
in kind of way, right? It's like, hey, reach
Yeah.
out and so forth. And once once um, once it gets, but then once it starts getting integrated into commercial products and things like that, there's things.
Yeah, it is definitely for anyone who's involved with those communities, it does present a challenge, but I think it's a good challenge and it's one that I think that a lot of us we are very much up to. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
so I'm excited to see where our various projects are at this time next year and hopefully we are all recovering from jet lag from physically coming back from Brussels.
Right.
Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Definitely wanna get back to it. Hope and as well for our other community project conferences like
Mhm.
LAS and Linux App
Yeah.
Summit, Product and Academy and
Yeah. That would be fantastic. So,
I think all of us are very eager to see each other again after such a long time, right?
yeah, because it'll probably be at least 2 years. So,
Yeah, it will be 2 years since a lot of us have seen each other, and so that's quite a long time.
yeah.
Doing the best we can, right?
Yep. So, everyone just stay safe, stay home, stay protected. So, I think we have been chatting for an hour. So, and
Oh,
also,
yes,
more worrisomely, I'm almost out of tea. So,
I finished.
well, I think we better both get some more tea then. So, Sri, thank you so much. And thank you for being our curator, especially through FOSDEM.
Yep.
And yeah, and
I'll have to do one more post I missed yesterday. I'll have to do another one
act,
today.
that will be great. So, anyway, and thank you everyone who's been listening, and we'll see you next time.